Hello, welcome back to the channel. Welcome to another debrief video of the Arma Hobby I can't even speak. Arma Hobby Hurricane, that's easy for me to say, in 1/48 scale. Clearly, I've done a number of these on the channel. This is why I didn't go down the full build, but I thought it would make an interesting video because this is a model of a warbird. The aeroplane comes from the Polish Heritage Flight. Their Hurricane is based out of Duxford currently, but they're being forced to move. Politics, you know, how it is with these sorts of things. So they're looking for a new home. They're also fundraising because they were due to take the aeroplane to Poland for an anniversary this year. However, there's been some serviceability issues, not least with the fin and rudder that needed a bit of work on it, well, quite a lot of work, and completely reskinning and everything. So when I visited the aeroplane back in Ramadan, which was about March, April time, there was no fin and rudder on the aeroplane at all. So I couldn't have a play with the controls because obviously, you know, nothing down the back end was connected. But yeah, really interesting. Now, my mate Dave Harvey, he's one of the pilots. I knew Dave when he was back in the Air Force. I was back in the Navy. And actually, when I went through my initial instructor training out of Cranwell, Dave was one of the instructors there. So, and we actually flew together. I checked the logbook when Dave invited me down to sit in the aeroplane and have a little play. Fantastic day. I've done a separate video on that. I'll link it at the end of the screen, and you can go and watch that. Now, while I was there, Dave handed me an Arma Hobby Mark IIb and said, would you make this for us and do our aeroplane? And it's an Arma Hobby Hurricane in 48 scale, so I couldn't really say no. And it's all finished. So I'm going to give you a bit of a debrief on it. Just before I delve into the actual, we pop over to the bench and we delve into the project. The aeroplane itself, the aeroplane was a Canadian-built Mark 12B, which is equivalent to a Mark IIb. The Canadian aeroplanes didn't have a spinner. The spinner on their aeroplane, they think, is from a Constellation. So it's not a Hurricane spinner, so that needed modifying. It's got extra fuel tanks in the wings where the gun bays are, so I did a bit of scribing for the filler caps. Although it's a 12B and there are gun ports for the extra sort of two machine guns, the outer machine guns on each wing, the skinning on the top doesn't have any of the sort of loading hatches or anything like that, nor the shell ejector chutes underneath. So that all needed modifying as well. Obviously it's a warbird, so it didn't have the Sutton harness. It's got a modern harness, and that was a bit of a complication. So all in all, a few modifications were required. That brings me on to the paint scheme. The paint scheme on this aeroplane is quite patchy when you see it in real life. It's had a few sort of airframe partial repaints, and there's a noticeable tonal shift, especially on the fuselage, between the colours. And I wanted to try and capture that as well. So that was quite tricky, actually, really had to wrap my brains on what paints I was going to use. The paints used on this are MRP, most of them provided by Premium Hobbies, channel sponsor, so thank you to Ed for those. And yeah, just other little scratch building bits and bobs here and there, which I'll take you through when we pop over to the bench, which we might as well do right now. So I'll see you back over at the bench. Right, here we are at the bench. Let's pick her up. Right, so first thing in the cockpit. Now I know this is going to be maybe a little bit difficult to see because it's quite dark in there, But first of all, the seat. This is the 3D printed seat from Arma Hobby. Comes with the Sutton harness, obviously. Therefore, it had to be modified. The sort of holes were filled in. A little bit of scraping here and there. Scratch built a new QRF, quick release fitting. And then obviously it's painted black. Might just be able to see in there. In fact, hold on. This is making a right noise. And a right mess. If I can... Oh, sorry. Maybe you can see now if I can get the light at the right angle. There we go. Might be able to just see the buckle there and the seat straps. The bulkhead at the rear here, obviously the wartime aeroplane had the armour plate. That's how the kit comes. In Dave's aeroplane, the sort of area behind here has been cut out. They've put in a little stowage with a little flap here. That was scratch built. Thin piece of card, bit of rod, and then I made the sort of piano hinge thing underneath, and then under that is like this little harness gubbins thing that goes under there. So that was scratch built. Other than that, the cockpit is pretty much stock. It's a beautiful cockpit, I will say. Right, then the modifications on the airframe. Let me just sort the lighting out again, because that's going to cause a bit of glare. Right. This airframe was originally a Mark 12B, had the B-wing. The gun ports are there in the aeroplane. However, the panels for the gun panels are not. Therefore, I had to fill those in. Very delicately, bit of super glue, run around the panels, and then it was all kind of sanded back. And then the riveting was restored. I actually got rid of all the rivets that were around that panel, and then they are recessed. The ones at the back are still raised. The other modification to the top of the wing was just here. The real thing has extra fuel filler caps. So that's been added either side, and then underneath, the ejector ports have been eliminated. That was just a little bit of perfect plastic putty and just wiped away, so no sanding, because obviously again we've got these raised rivets. Note the little post-war aerial thingy there. The rivets are actually quite prominent in the kit, a little bit too prominent I thought, because I was going to use the decals on the wing. So they've been rubbed back and they're a lot more subtle. So I'm very pleased with how they look. That was the wing modification. Another modification for this particular aeroplane is the spinner. You can see it's not a typical Hurricane shape, and that is because Dave told me he thinks that it was replaced with a Constellation spinner. The reason being is, being a Mark 12B, that they just had the propeller boss sort of naked, if you like, and obviously they, when the aeroplane was restored, they wanted a spinner on it, and that's the only one they could get hold of, I'm assuming. I've also added a little spacer. You might be able to see just the spacer there, because on the real thing it does sort of stick out a little bit, and you can actually see some gubbins behind, but I've drilled out the holes you can see there. But obviously if I was to drill out all the way around, then I'm not going to be able to mount the spinner. I'd have to scratch build bulkheads, trying to get it all in the middle, just TFD. Therefore, it's just been painted matte black. But the spacer there, you get that authentic, if you can see there, that's better, isn't it? You can get the authentic gap. Other little additions that I've made is this little bracing strut here. That's missing in the kit. There we go. That's missing in the kit. My other ones that I've done it further aft, but actually looking at the aeroplane, it's right at the front. So that's been added. Also at the rear, all these actuating rods for the radiator flap, they've been scratch built and added as well. And talking of scratch building, the handhold, this and the step are actually linked. When the step is down, then the handhold automatically opens. It's really clever. The kind of cover, if you like, is they do supply a part if you're going to have the step retracted, but if you're going to have the step open, there's nothing there. So that's just a bit of card just put in there on an angle. A lot less fiddly than when I did that last time, I must admit. It worked really well. The other detailing bits I've added are the grab handle on the canopy here, and then the grab handles on the inside of the canopy there and there. Just added those from fine wire. Going back underneath again, I didn't use the plastic lens cover. I used the 3D, not 3D, what am I talking about? The ultraviolet UV resin to do that. The gear legs are the Arma Hobby 3D printed gear legs, and they're much more detailed. You might be able to see the rivet detail there, but also you get the brake hose, which is all molded in. But actually, if you look at it sort of down here, it might be difficult to see if I can get my hand in the way on the background for a bit of contrast. It's actually proud, it sticks out. It's brilliant, that. The wheels also are 3D printed resin. Originally I painted the wheels silver, but looking at photos of the real thing, they were actually sky, so they were painted sky. Not too much weathering in the wheel well, just a little bit, just to bring it to life. And that is it really for the construction. Everything else was from the box, which brings me on to the painting. The painting then. All started underneath. This is MRP Sky. A little bit of fading here and there, not too much though. Obviously this is a restored modern day warbird, and it wouldn't be that much weathered. You will see a difference in tone between the green and brown on the fuselage here and here. Very prominent on the real thing. That is because this aeroplane has had partial repaints. I'm assuming, because it's more faded, that the aft paint is older and the forward part and the wings is fresher. All MRP. Most of it supplied by Premium Hobbies, sponsor of the channel. So thank you, Ed. The rear half then was, like I say, MRP, darker, dark green, straight from the bottle. Little bit of fading, not too much, just to add a bit of interest, but actually pretty much neat. The forward parts were a little bit tricky. How do I make the tone richer, if you like? I found quite a bright green and just mixed it by eye actually for the wings and the forward part. Obviously hard demarcation here. The rest of the camouflage is all sprayed freehand. NATO brown was added to the dark earth just to darken it down a bit, and then that was sprayed. And I've done a little bit of sort of fading effects and dirt effects on there. With MRP, you don't need any gloss varnish because it's very shiny, straight out the bottle. And then it was onto the decals. I thought about spraying all the markings, and I thought, do you know what, I'm going to give the decals a go because they're by Tepmod. They're really good decals. I love them. They're very thin. They're quite grabby because they're very thin, so you've got to be careful. But I used Ammo setting solutions and they work really, really well. Proper settled in. Quite a few coats, I will admit, to get it all bedded down. Scalpel blade along the panel lines, that kind of thing. But it worked very well. Same on the underside. And the fin, I should say. Right, now, the codes and the serial number. This aeroplane represents two different Hurricanes, as you can see. So DWX on one side, P3935, and then on the other side, WXE P29, and I think that's 54. These were sprayed with custom masks that I made myself, sized from the kit decals, and just sort of traced, cut out. And the way I did it is the roundel, that's the kit decal. What I did is I sized it, I cut a circle out, and then that enabled me to place the mask, then place the sort of mask for where the decal is going to go, and then I can space the rest of the markings from that. And that method worked really, really well, actually. It's a little bit more tedious, it's a little bit slower than, you know, just whacking it all down, but you know, this is a custom aeroplane, so I had to go down that route, and it worked very well. And I'm really pleased I used the decals for the roundels. Obviously there's a few sort of panel line, well, not panel lines, but sort of strengthening stuff going on, but that's it. There's no sort of rivets or anything like that, and I was confident about using the decals on there. Much easier than spraying the roundels, trying to get that really round, I will say. Medium sea grey from MRP, and then the serials was essentially just black, but with a bit of NATO black, a few drops of that just to kind of knock that real deep dark pure black down. That worked really well. I was really pleased with how that has turned out. Not too many touch-ups required either. The back end was sealed with MRP satin varnish, but I wanted a slightly more shiny finish. You might be able to see that from the wings and the forward fuselage. You can see the shine on the wings going on there. So when that was dry, masked it off, and then just, it was a 50-50 mix of gloss and satin from VMS over the top, and that sealed everything in. And actually I've got that sort of change in patina, which I'm really, really pleased about. That worked very well. The spinner and props. Now, clearly, the wartime aeroplane didn't have the prop logos. The restored aeroplane does. Hamilton Standard. These were from Airscale. The varnish used here was MRP because I just wanted a slightly more shiny finish and a bit smooth. So I used MRP, and that worked really, really well. Weathering wise, not too much. Obviously this is a restored aeroplane, but you know, all aeroplanes weather to some extent. It had a very subtle panel line wash from MRP. That was the ubiquitous Starship Filth. The Starship Filth was lightened on the underside because I didn't want too much of a contrast. A little bit of weathering in the wheel wells going on. Not too much, just a little bit of evidence of oil, that kind of thing. And then just a little bit of paint chipping. So on the real thing, there is a bit of a chunk of paint out of the leading edge. So I just did that little thing here. And then quite interesting wear indication. Quite interesting wear on the panel line. Interestingly, this is the kind of step walkway, but it says no step at the end, which is a bit odd. Yeah, just a little bit of paint chipping here, and you can just see a little bit of primer showing through on the edge of that. That was done with a brush and ammo acrylic. Then it was all that was sealed in again. The exhausts, obviously I've done a separate video on the exhausts. Quite weathered the exhausts actually on the real aeroplane, and I just try to copy the photos best I could to produce that exhaust effect. That was all sealed in. Sorry, various oils on that. Ooh, nearly bloody dropped it then. Matte black base coat, then burnt iron from a stand, which is essentially Alclad, then various oils over the top, flesh, dust, and then a little bit of I think it was raw umber for the sort of orangey brown colour, and then a thin filter over the top of Trax Wash, which is like a very dark rust colour. Obviously these are not rusted, but it really gives that sort of hot metal feel to it. Really good. And then it was just putting it together, really. The undercarriage and the wheels are stuck on with 5-minute epoxy. I tend to do that these days. Now I've got to get this home, so the aerial mast, that's not glued in. That's just a very tight push fit. So the spinner, that comes off. All these bits are glued in though, but I've never had a problem getting it back. It would be securely packaged in my suitcase. The final thing to go on was the mirror, and I just used a bit of green stuff chrome, if I can get that to catch the light without hitting the tail. There we go. Nice chrome effect on that, and that was it. All finished. There we are. That is the Arma Hobby Hurricane IIb, done up for a 12B modern warbird, which is representing 2 Mark 1As. Really enjoyed it. The Arma Hobby kit, as regular viewers will know, is arguably my favourite kit ever. And this was a real interesting challenge to paint and weather a modern warbird and to try and be true to the original. I think I've achieved it. I'm very pleased with how it's turned out. It's a shame I don't get to keep it. I have to give it to Dave. But I've really enjoyed making it. I hope you enjoyed this debrief video. And what we'll do now is we'll just nip over back to the chair for a very final wash up. There we are. Here it is. Another 1/48 scale Arma Hobby Hurricane. All done. I've only got one left in the stash, a 2C, which I am going to do at some point as a Southeast Asia Air Command aeroplane, because I really like those with the white stripes over the wings and around the tail and all that kind of stuff, and you can really go to town on the weathering. A unique model, I think. Looking forward to delivering it. I don't do commissions. I've done this for a mate and to help out the Polish Heritage Flight, trying to give them a little bit of exposure on my channel and on my social media bits and bobs. And yeah, pop over to their website, help them out if you can for the project 2026, where they want to take the aeroplane over to Poland for an anniversary. They're supposed to do it this year, but unfortunately the fin and rudder needed a bit of work, and it's still in the process of being recovered, and unfortunately they didn't make the deadline, but they're still actively fundraising. So I'll put a link in the description and you can pop over and have a look at their website, and feel free to donate or buy one of the prints or some of the merch, and that will all help them out. They're also being forced to move out of Duxford. The aeroplane's been there for about 40 years, I believe, and owing to some politics, they're going to have to move, so they're looking for a new home as well. But yeah, lovely, unique model, I think. A challenge to do a modern warbird and to be sympathetic to the real aeroplane and try and reproduce the finish of a real modern warbird. Really was quite challenging in areas, as you saw over the bench. But there we are. I hope you enjoyed that debrief. I know some of you really like this format. There are going to be more coming. I like it too, because I don't have to do all the editing, which is a right pain. I really don't like the editing, but I do enjoy getting the feedback back from you guys when I do post up the videos, so it is all worth it. There we are. Thanks very much for watching. Keep your ears pinned out for news on the channel and upcoming projects. Like, subscribe, all that YouTube blah, and please do pop over to the Polish Heritage Flights webpage and go check them out. So thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you soon. Cheers, bye bye.